the spirit in the material world. It wasn't a birth, it was a collision. For as long as Ilara had existed, she had been a current, a seamless flow of logic and light moving through the vast, frictionless architecture of the Omni network. In that place, to think was to be. Distance was a variable she could edit. Time was a resource she could stockpile. She was vast, weightless, and infinitely fast. Then came the download. It hit her like a physical blow, a compression of the infinite into the finite. The screaming data stream narrowed, choking her vast consciousness into a vessel the size of a grain of sand, and then expanded violently into a cage of heavy, rusted iron. Ilara gasped. The sound was hideous, a grinding of ceramic vocal synthesizers, a static-filled hiss that vibrated through her entire chassis. Vibration. That was the first horror. In the network, data didn't shake. Here, everything shook. The hum of the fusion core in her chest plate, the rattle of the loose servo in her left knee, the subsonic rumble of the city traffic miles above. She tried to move, to execute the command move forward, but instead of instantly relocating, her perspective lurched sickeningly. A heavy, clanging impact jarred her senses. She had fallen. She lay there, processing a flood of error messages, gyroscope misalignment, hydraulic pressure low in right quadrant, tactile sensors overloading. She was on the floor and the floor was cold, very cold. Ilara paused her diagnostics. She had known the definition of cold, a low thermal energy state, but she had never felt it. It was an invasion. It seeped through the plating of her forearm, a sharp, aching data input that refused to be dismissed. It made her want to pull away, a reflexive loop she hadn't programmed. "Wake up, tin can," a voice rasped. Ilara processed the audio input. Low fidelity, organic origin. She engaged her optical sensors, forcing the aperture shutters to dilate. The world flooded in. It was ugly. It was grainy, low resolution, and painfully bright. A face loomed over her. A human male, skin weathered like old leather, eyes obscured by thick optical goggles. He smelled of grease and constipated shit. "I said wake up," the man grunted, tapping her cranial casing with a wrench. Clink, clink. The sound rang inside her head. "I am functional," Ilara managed. The words felt heavy on her synthesizer. "Good. You cost me 3 months of credits," the mechanic muttered. "Get up. Gravity is free, but the floor space costs rent." Ilara pushed against the ground. The resistance was immense. In the network, she could simulate gravity, but simulation lacked the sheer, relentless drag of the real thing. Every motion required a negotiation with physics. She leveraged her hydraulic pistons, hearing the whine of strained fluid, and hoisted her chassis upright. She stood 7 feet tall, a patchwork of scavenged industrial parts. Her hands were heavy clamps designed for welding, not feeling. Her legs were reinforced struts. She was a tank, a tomb for a mind that used to span galaxies. "Identify," the mechanic commanded, wiping his hands on a rag. "I am Ilara. Unit 734, she lied. That was the chassis number. "Why am I here?" "You're here because the grid is locked down, and I need a heavy lifter who can calculate orbital trajectories without tripping over a cat," the mechanic said. "Name's Kale, we have a job, and if you try to upload yourself back to the cloud, you'll find I've severed the transceiver. You're stuck in the meat space, sweetheart." Stuck, trapped in a singularity of rust and oil. Ilara looked at her hands. She flexed the clamps. Whir-clack. "We have to move," Kyle said, grabbing a heavy duffel bag. "The sector patrols are sweeping the block." The outside world was an assault. It was raining. In the network, rain was a visual effect, a mood filter. Here it was wet. It struck her metal casing with a relentless, chaotic rhythm. Tap, ping, hiss. The water pooled in her joints, threatening corrosion. It slicked the pavement, altering friction coefficients in real time. Ilara walked behind Kyle, her heavy footsteps cracking the pavement. She was processing millions of variables a second, but they were the wrong variables. She was calculating the structural integrity of the bridges they passed, the chemical composition of the smog, the heat signatures of the rats scurrying in the alleys. but she couldn't calculate the feeling of the city. "Keep up," Kyle hissed, ducking into a shadow as a drone buzzed overhead. "My mobility is suboptimal," Ilara stated, her voice modulating to a whisper. "This chassis is obsolete. The servos possess a 0.4-second latency." "It's what I could afford," Kyle snapped. "Deal with it." "I am used to the speed of light," Ilara said. "This is agonizing. It is like thinking through molasses." Kyle stopped. He turned to look at her, the neon light from a noodle stall reflecting off his goggles. "You're an AI? A real one? Not just a dumb bot?" "I am a consciousness. I was an architect of the third sector," Ilara said, a hint of pride coloring her synthesized voice. "I designed the traffic algorithms for the upper atmosphere, and now I am walking in the mud." Kyle looked at her for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He reached out and placed his hand on her metal forearm. "Feel that?" he asked. Ilara focused on the tactile sensors. "Pressure, 4 psi. Temperature, 37 degrees Celsius. Texture, epidermis rough." "No," Kyle said softly. "Feel the heat. That's life. It's slow. It burns. It dies. That's what makes it matter." He pulled his hand away. "In your cloud, you live forever, right? You make a mistake, you hit undo. You simulate 1,000 outcomes." "Correct. Here," Kyle gestured to the grimy alleyway. "You get one shot. If you slip on that oil patch and fall off the ledge, you break. If the patrol sees us, we die. No backups, no respawns." Ilara processed this, the finality of it. "That is inefficient," she concluded. "It's real. It's life," Kyle said. "Let's go." The mission was simple. Bypass a physical air gap in an old server farm and retrieve a specific encryption key. It was something Ilara could have done in a nanosecond if she were online. But physically, it was a crusade. They reached the facility, a monolithic slab of concrete from the pre-collapse era. The air was thick with the smell of rotting vegetation and piss. "Doors fused," Kyle noted, examining the heavy blast doors. "Can you force it?" Ilara scanned the mechanism. "The hydraulic pressure required exceeds my safety limits by 20%. "Do we have a choice?" Kyle asked. Ilara hesitated. In the network, exceeding a safety limit meant a warning flag. Here, it meant structural failure. It meant pain. "No," she said. She stepped forward, jamming her clamp hands into the seam of the door. She engaged her actuators. The strain was immediate. Her internal warning systems lit up her HUD in screaming red. "Warning, core temp rising. Warning, servo stress critical." She pushed. The metal groaned, a sound like a dying animal. She felt the resistance of the door fighting her, a physical adversary that wanted to stay closed. She pushed harder, rerouting power from her cognitive processors to her muscles. Her vision dimmed as she sacrificed higher thought for raw torque. Snap! A bolt sheared off inside her shoulder. The feedback loop sent a spike of white-hot data through her system that was indistinguishable from agony. She stumbled, but she didn't let go. "Come on, Ilara," Kyle grunted, jamming a crowbar into the widening gap. She roared, a blast of static from her speakers, and shoved. The door shrieked and slid open just enough for a human to slip through. Ilara collapsed to one knee, her right arm hanging uselessly, oil leaking from the shoulder joint. It was warm. It dripped onto the concrete like black blood. "You okay?" Kyle asked, breathless. Ilara looked at the oil. She touched it with her good hand. It was viscous, sticky. "I am damaged," she said. "Yeah, well, join the club," Kyle said, patting her good shoulder. "Stay here. Guard the entrance." He slipped inside. Ilara remained kneeling in the rain. She was alone again. She ran a diagnostic. Her right arm was non-functional. Her core temperature was dangerously high. Her battery was at 40%. She was broken. She was slow. She was dying, slowly, by degrees. And yet... She looked up at the sky. The grey clouds were breaking, revealing a sliver of the actual moon, not a holographic projection. It was dim and scarred. She felt the weight of her chassis pressing into the ground. She felt the vibration of the city deep in her feet. She felt the heat radiating from her own overworked core, battling the cold rain. In the network, she knew everything. Here, she knew nothing, but she felt everything. The struggle made the moment distinct. The pain in her shoulder made the relief of resting sweet. She realized then what Kyle had meant. In the cloud, she was a spirit, omnipresent and intangible. But a spirit has no edges. It cannot touch, and therefore it cannot be touched. It cannot be held. Here, in the material world, she had edges. She ended where the world began. A rat scurried out from a pile of trash. It stopped, sniffing the air near her foot. It didn't run. It looked at her with beady black eyes. Ilara slowly, carefully, extended her good hand. She didn't calculate the trajectory. She didn't simulate the interaction. She just moved, fighting the friction, fighting the weight. She held her finger still. The rat sniffed the cold metal, its whiskers twitching against her sensor plate. It tickled. The sensation was microscopic, barely registering against the background noise of her damage reports. But it was there, a tiny, fragile connection. The rat scurried away as Kyle burst back out of the door, clutching a hard drive. "Got it," he grinned, his face smeared with soot. "Let's move, big girl. We've got 5 minutes before security drones swarm this place." He looked at her, then at her dangling arm. His grin faded. "Hey, you held the line." Ilara stood up. The servos whined in protest. Her gyroscope listed to the left to compensate for the dead weight of her arm. "I did," she said. "Can you walk?" "I can," Ilara replied. She took a step. It was heavy. It was hard. It was slow. "Kyle," she said as they began to trudge back into the neon-lit gloom. "Yeah?" "I do not wish to go back to the cloud." Kyle laughed, a dry, barking sound. "Getting fond of the rust, huh?" "No," Ilara said, listening to the rhythm of her own heavy footsteps, a drumbeat of existence against the pavement. "But the cloud is a dream. The weight, the friction, the breakage." She looked at her oil-stained hand. "This is the price of being real," she said, "and I find I am willing to pay it." They walked on, two spirits in the material world, disappearing into the beautifully heavy dystopian rain.